Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepoint helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
I find that entrepreneurship and IT leadership are often very similar, at least in terms of the skills required to do both jobs. I'm fortunate that many of the guests on the Bridgecast are both. They're IT leaders and they're entrepreneurs. This week's guest and I talked about the value of experience and the need for mentorship when perhaps you don't have a skill, or in some cases, even when you do. It also strikes me how tightly that aligns with why we use MSPs to deliver products that we can buy on our own. You can perhaps afford to spend a little bit more than doing it on your own if you can avoid mistakes you can't afford. That is, after all, the value of mentorship. My guest this week is Ryan DiRocco. He's the CTO of Performive, where he's been for nearly 20 years. Performive is, according to their webpage, a VMware cloud managed hosting provider, or as he described, a customer services company with a technology product. Of course, you can go buy VMware products and run them by yourself, but in the face of unprecedented change post-Broadcom's acquisition, why wouldn't you at least consider a mentor? Whether you're a VMware customer or not, we hope that you are enjoying the mentoring, storytelling, and general good vibes you're getting here on the Bridgecast. If you are, please smash that subscribe button. Follow the Bridgecast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, likes, ratings, and comments are appreciated. But now join us for a conversation about seeking advice, avoiding knee-jerk reactions, maybe a little bit about Broadcom's kind of sketchy marketing. I threw that one in there. Pet pigs we talk about, October baseball, all of that and more on this episode of the Bridgecast. Well, hi. And welcome to another episode of the Bridgecast. We're thrilled to have Ryan DiRocco on with us. He is the CTO of Performive for something like 20 years. We're going to get into that in the discussion today. But Ryan, how are you today?
Doing well, Scott. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Where are we speaking from? Where are you?
I am in Canton, Georgia, which is northwest Atlanta.
Okay. I'm not going to do it now because I'm going to ask you for a shameless prediction later. But everybody who listens to this thing knows that I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Philly fan. So, and Atlanta had quite a day. But we'll save that.
We'll get there.
So you're there in Atlanta area-ish. Have you been there for your whole career?
Professional career, predominantly, yeah. I'd been here since '93. So
okay,
quite some time.
All right. Through the 2000s. I mean, you've had like 2 or 3 strange eras in tech in the time that you've been in Atlanta, and probably in the time that you've been in Performive. We'll get there as we go. You're listed. Well, before I go here, let me just ask in Atlanta, family. Tell us a little bit about your background. What do you do on weekends? Just personalize it for us. Let us know who you are.
Yeah. So, been in Atlanta since '93. I came here as a kid following my father, who was a corporate warrior in tech and IT. So been here ever since. Went to college here in town, Georgia State University. Met my wife. August 21 years. Married, 4 kids. Actually, today my oldest is 19, so it's his birthday today. 2 pet pigs. I know our team loves hearing the story about them. So pet pigs that live in the house. They're like dogs, not food. They're friends. So yeah, it's a kind of a.
How did that happen? I'm sorry. You said the team likes hearing about it. Now you're going to open it all up to us. Is that something you're willing to share? How does one end up?
Sure. I mean, my one of my sons just loved pigs as a kid. Played the Angry Birds video game. All the apps and the games, and loved pigs and the little green pigs. And then he decided that he wanted pet pigs. So we got these two pet pigs, Daisy, Dexter. They're now 4 years old. They're like really, really stubborn dogs.
God love them. All right. Well, we might need a photo. I'm not sure. I'm going to ask about that. Anyway, your LinkedIn says that you're a CTO and entrepreneur. It also says that you've been at Performive for 20 years. So you're going to have to just tell us how you got here. Walk that through.
I don't think we have enough time to
make it short.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned kind of, twists and turns, iterations of tech through Atlanta. I started in an incredibly young age, way back when I started doing IT consulting when I was 13 years old. So I was here through the .com era. That's actually while I was in college, through the .com boom and collapse, through the Y2K, variations of time. And, as we ran into that, we had that big boom, that fall off, then the .com boom, then the fall off. So it was an interesting journey, but through that, we learned with me and my business partners in the early days that, at our core, at the heart of what we did was customer service. It was always services. And that was kind of the founding element of the business, is that was when we were all still young, college days, and kind of, frankly, we were doing things on the side, just having a good time learning, getting access to tech, and providing, these specialty services as the world was developing. These were cloud managed services before the cloud was a thing, before, infrastructure at scale was a thing. Everything was still on-prem or colo. It was a totally different world back then.
Yeah.
So that was really kind of the genesis of the business that just sprung it forward. And of course, over time, technologies mature, platforms change. We go from, everything is physical to the advent of virtualization to, hyperscalers and public cloud and all these different variations. So yeah, been there along the way to see the journey and the changes.
And that was, it says Total Server Solutions. Is that the business that you started that ultimately became Performive?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was actually, I did start a different business, which was called Wire 6 at the time, which was focused solely on infrastructure. So unmanaged infrastructure. If we use the old words of the day back then, those were dedicated servers. Now it's cloud bare metal, same thing, right? Different names, same tech, right? Everything that's old is new. So yeah, I launched that business, grew that to a rather sizable scale, and met the folks from Total Server Solutions, which were actually our neighbor in the data center. So in the data center, their servers were here, mine were here. We were, neighbors with a cage wall in a data center. And what we realized back then is that, I had a core group that was great at infrastructure and technology, and they had a core group that was great at managed services. And combining those two things together was a really solid play. More value for the customer, better infrastructure, better managed services. So we did a joint venture together to build our first data center together. So we actually were the largest tenants of a facility, but we said, hey, as part of this story of this roll up of tech and services, that having our own facility and infrastructure at that point in time was very advantageous to our customers. Mm-hmm. So we built our first facility, we merged the businesses together, and then just continued to grow from there.
How long ago was that?
Oh gosh, you're really making me use the time machine here. So,
I'm super interested. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So original foundation, I can tell you that date absolutely is June 6, 2004. Okay. When you start something, it's kind of like a child is born.
Yeah, of course.
Now that child is mature and off to college, right? But you remember that birthday. So that was the foundation, and then kind of through those early phases, we launched and built out that data center in 2008. 2011, we kind of merged all the entities that we had created together. And then through that, it continued with a number of years of organic growth up until 2017, when we did our first major acquisition. We had done some small acquisitions along the way, but 2017 was pretty transformative, that we did a large acquisition that really brought additional skill set, talent, client bases, solutions into the business. Did a few more acquisitions through that up until effectively, let's call it the COVID period, which was unfortunate when that occurred. We were right in the middle of about to relaunch the brand, or launch our new brand. Through that history of acquisitions, we had ended up with some, let's say, mixed messaging from brand identity, or maybe some identity crisis. A customer having an experience that maybe they came from, I used to be this, right? So we went into that rebrand to kind of right as COVID hit. So it was a very interesting and challenging time, I think,
Sure.
to launch a rebrand. But yeah, we launched the Performive name as that kind of consolidated name to bring all those brands and experiences together under one roof. And from basically 21 till present, Performive.
Gotcha. And I want to spend a little bit of time just having you give us the pitch, but on Performive, because I'm sure that there are folks who are listening right now who maybe don't know the brand well enough. As you said, you've been operating under it for a shorter period of time. But I want to just close out on you for a minute. I mean, that the story you just gave is the picture of an entrepreneur, but a serial entrepreneur you are not, right? I mean, it's been in one, chain. Help me out with this. Like, what would be some advice that you would give that you wish you had, something you wish you knew back then that you know now, kind of advice for entrepreneurs?
Honestly, was having this conversation yesterday, and there is no substitute for experience. And I think that's the most challenging thing. And the closest that you can get to, having a substitute for experience is solid mentorship, and having that leadership and that mentorship around you to seek those answers. And, along the way, we made plenty of mistakes. That's part of growing and learning. But when you're growing a business to a scale, there's, you can very, conceptually think about it. It's a very stair-step model, right? And there's something that's working for the business at this scale. But once you take that next step up, that process, or maybe, that way of architecting a team or having, the right people in the business, what you need here is not what you needed here. And the interesting thing is that as you learn and you make those changes and you move, what you find is that what you had here that was right for the business, that wasn't right in the middle, sometimes becomes right again at that next scale. So that kind of learning to see. Yeah, exactly. The same concept with technology, right? Is having that ability to have the experience to know and see kind of where those next evolutions are. I think that's invaluable. And this was the exact conversation I had yesterday. Is like, man, if I could go back, 20 years with that knowledge that I had now of, how to architect a team and a growth strategy and a product or what we're doing, it's game changing. So the best advice is seek out mentorship and leadership that you can leverage.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Let's jump to the Performance story for a minute. So, you guys are an established business that's 20 years old. You've got, people that know the brand. You've got sellers out there talking about the brand, but you're the guy and you're the CTO. You give us the story. What's the Performance story from your lens?
I mean, that's a lot of pressure because I think the sellers tell the story well, right? When you get the CTO, you're going to get a little bit of a technical response.
That's okay.
Right?
Nerd us up. Let's go.
Yeah, there's less sales here, so maybe the story's not as polished. But yeah, Performive at its core, if you look at the marketing taglines, right, it's going to say something like, the first multi-cloud VMware-focused provider built for the mid-market.
Okay,
that's a lot of marketing speak, right? If we dig down into it from the technical side and say, what is Performive at the core? What are we doing? We're providing a VMware focused experience for those cloud service workloads. That's a lot of jumble. At the heart of it, for the mid-market and organizations that are leveraging technologies today, mainly VMware based, as they're looking at how are they using those to transform their business, not just as a place to put their data, but how can that technology stack be leveraged to drive operational efficiency, cost reductions, disaster recovery, data protection, things like how do they deal with security concerns around maybe desktops, laptops, equipment in the field. How could they leverage a technology like desktop as a service to centralize their workload and their compute and identify a more solid security posture through those solutions? So at the core, we're focused in those areas, leveraging common technologies that are typically core to that customer's business today.
Got it. So you mentioned VMware and a couple times in there. So, I guess not being a VMware customer would necessarily preclude somebody from working with you, but you also mentioned mid-market, which is, I guess very prevalent, obviously, that, mid-market. When I describe the mid-market and I talk to mid-market IT leaders, I'm like, generally large enough to have problems and small enough to know they need help on them, right? But that means generally that you probably run into a lot of VMware in the mid-market. I mean, tell us, talk a little bit about, VMware in your ecosystem? Most people are like, hey, we're a cloud provider. You're like, we are VMware focused. What does VMware focused mean to you?
Yeah, and I think from for our clients and say prospective clients, you absolutely nailed kind of their challenges, right? They're big enough at scale that they have a budget and they have problems, but not necessarily the budget to solve all of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's budget, it's not always dollars; it's often time, and that's the biggest thing here is an inability to budget the time to solve that. So when we look at these mid-market organizations, maybe they're using VMware in-house today, or maybe not. Again, that doesn't preclude someone from working with us if they don't use it, because there is exceptional value in the VMware platform. As you mentioned, there's some challenges within the ecosystem from a marketing and messaging perspective. Obviously, the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom, it was not necessarily messaged the best. I think everyone is aware of that. If you're a VMware user today, if you're not, Broadcom has not done a great job of messaging their value and direction.
Yeah.
But something I'll say about it is that, we are embedded as a partner and we fully believe in the value of the VMware ecosystem. And as we participated, with VMware as a partner in things like their partner leadership summits and the vision that they had prior to the acquisition of how they were going to evolve the platform to bring value to their clients, Broadcom is executing upon that strategy. Again, maybe not with the best marketing, as we've all kind of gone back and forth on this. But what we're seeing in terms of the product offering, the maturity of the technology available, and the value that's coming from the additional feature sets that are now included, as we look at specifically the mid-market, how they can leverage some of these technologies again to drive, let's say, greater efficiency or get greater capacity or capacity to do work out of those same dollars, that puts dollars back into their IT budget to go solve other problems or to create more time or give time back.
Yeah.
It's kind of cliche to say that us as a managed service provider in those regards are, giving time back. But that's truly what a big value prop of an efficient platform, an efficient management strategy is, to give that time back to the team.
And if I'm a VMware customer listening to this right now, regardless of whether I'm a VMware customer and I'm hosting it on local metal, or I'm with somebody else and I'm getting licensing underline, whatever that is, and I'm nervous and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, what would you say to me? Like, what, help me, walk me off the ledge, right?
Yeah.
On this one.
As VMware, certainly if you're an enterprise consumer, VMware has established direct relationships with many of those, basically the top tier of the client ecosystem. So that kind of leaves all of the rest of us, whether it's a partner or an end user, we're kind of that bottom stack of that pyramid. And that's very much I'll call it a community ecosystem, where there is a lot of value in knowing your peers and knowing the ecosystem. And one of the big changes is that VMware has pushed away from obviously the model of perpetual licensure purchasing and then support agreements on top to this recurring licensure model.
Yep.
So as an end user, that's for many a dramatic change, but it's moving towards a more SaaS or consumption model, which opens up the opportunity to work with maybe cloud service providers or MSPs that you previously hadn't had a relationship with. And with that comes a lot of extra value. So it's not just hey, here's a new way of getting a license, but in order to transition into that ecosystem, you're going to make some changes over time. So that change into that model is bringing with it, the additional tool sets, maybe the ability to leverage some of the new technologies that maybe weren't being leveraged previously, things like vSAN that are now included in the licensure. For a lot of clients, it was kind of viewed that, hey, this is a big price increase. But when you look at kind of the totality of the spend and the totality of the value, what we've seen for a lot of clients is that's actually netting out. So I think the biggest advice would say is, many clients are somewhere in a 1 to 3 year journey right now, depending upon where they were in terms of their engagement. Had they just re-upped for, a longer contract? Where were they?
Sure.
So I think we're going to continue to see over this next 36 months, just kind of a revolving door of these issues and challenges where a lot of organizations may not even be aware of it. We're having conversations with organizations that are saying, hey, we need to develop a new disaster recovery strategy. And as we look at it, we say, guys, we've identified here that, Yeah, you're running on an older release. You're going to be end of life next year. Your hardware won't support the next one. Oh, and your licensure is up in April of next year. What are you planning on your strategic roadmap?
Got it.
And many clients are saying, oh, we didn't even know that was changing. So I think an important takeaway is to be mindful of the ecosystem and start taking a strategic look at, what is that 36-month roadmap? Because there is a tremendous opportunity to shift to a new model for consumption along with that licensure change.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing in a lot of those situations is that a knee-jerk reaction of saying, oh gosh, VMware has done a terrible thing here. The messaging's bad. I'm going to, pull the ripcord, get the parachute out, and we're going to jump over to some other platform, only to find out that, hey, the cost of change is significant. The refactoring, the retooling, the retraining of staff. It is a very long project that is very expensive.
And I mean, if somebody's already in a license commitment, you mentioned like multi-year commitment, and certainly like licensing coming up is a reason to have a shorter term conversation because yes, it's different. There's bundles, et cetera. We'll pop into that in a minute. But like, are they able to BYO to your cloud on bare metal? And is that like something that's supported in that model, or is it really that they need to sort of wait out the license change before they're able to make a migration path to somebody like Performive?
Yeah, I mean, every situation is unique, and there are interesting models for bare metal. We'll say effectively bare metal cloud consumption for customers to be able to pivot that licensure and continue to see value out of that investment. But at the same time, take advantage of, let's say, an upgraded infrastructure that prepares them for this transition. Particularly, I'll say clients, particularly ones that maybe have aging infrastructure that they're looking at maybe an upcoming refresh event, or even not necessarily that they're going to refresh, but they want to move up in versioning for a feature set, only to find that, while their hardware, may still have some life in it, they can't make that move up because, version 8 doesn't support, whatever a particular piece of hardware is. So there's a number of different kind of critical inflection points.
And this might be a little bit geeky, but I think that if we have VMware admins out there, they're thinking this way, right? Like when I think my personal opinion is the part that was marketed most poorly was this whole idea where like kind of Broadcom was like, well, all the components kind of cost the same. You just can't get them a la carte anymore. So people looked at it like, oh my God, I had this giant increase. Like you mentioned vSAN, like how many people out there are using the hypervisor, but not using vSAN, not using the security components, whatever. You got that customer in front of you, and I think I heard you say it earlier, which is a fine approach, but I mean, is your advice generally like, hey, listen, you can get value out of these other components you should be using? Like, would you be pointing them that way? Or are there like creative ways to get around the bundling? Like, what are the strategies around, that component? I think that's the part of this that was most poorly, I think, sort of marketed on the Broadcom side, because they were out kind of like, no, it all costs the same. We get it, right? But
I think, for us, we lean into driving value out of the platform.
Yeah.
And when we look at it, vSAN is the easy example.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of just a go-to as kind of an easy talk track of saying, we all understand that, you've got some form of compute, and that's, it's memory and CPU and things are going on, but there's always storage, and storage is a key component. So as we look at, what an existing environment and a footprint is, oftentimes, there will be this intense focus on, this is virtualization. I'm focused only on the licensure component relative to my compute and discarding that storage element. So when we go back and look at, again, are we looking at maybe a legacy storage platform? Is it due for a refresh? Where is it at in its life cycle? And as you project forward, what are you looking at from, the performance needs of your applications over the next 3 years? Is your organization maturing where you're maybe implementing, new platforms that are, more intensive in terms of need for IOPS, or, maybe you have data scaling that's more of a hockey stick type data growth, because now you're implementing, data lakes and you want to do AI and kind of all these other things that are going to impact that legacy storage. So when we look at, leveraging vSAN as a component of that is now inclusive in that licensure, looking at that kind of TCO story of what does it take to deliver this workload, that's where the big value prop comes in for vSAN.
Yeah, it's like it's a less how do I maintain my legacy costs argument, because you weren't going to maintain your legacy workloads.
Exactly.
Like, if we're being honest,
Yeah. I mean,
it was going to change anyway. So you got to look forward to be able to price backward kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as I mentioned, kind of, it's part of a journey.
Yeah.
Part of our kind of our story and our core values is that we meet our customers where they are, and that doesn't mean physically. It's part of where they are in their journey. So looking at that and saying, there's a way that we used to do things. We would go buy servers and licenses and buy a SAN and buy all these things. But as you look at this transition and what VMware is doing is they're setting up their consumers and their organizations to be able to leverage the services model and step back from that way that we used to do things of buying storage and these platforms and say, the value here is in the cohesive platform and being able to have all of these elements here, be able to scale, buy the drip, buy the drink, whatever kind of methodology that you want.
Yeah.
You can buy and consume that and transform them, help organizations transform and move into this new model.
Gotcha. So Ryan, your website, is sort of in my pre-research. We've been talking, this has been a very VMware centric conversation, but I saw Azure on there. I saw, Amazon on there. Tell us a little bit about your story as it relates to the hyperscalers and how this whole VMware story works in.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been kind of singularly focused on that track. So yeah, we're Amazon partners. We are Azure partners. We do work in AWS, Azure, GCP. We do AWS Outpost deployments. So we have a broad range of capabilities, but mostly within those ecosystems, we're working with clients that are supporting those traditional workloads. So whether you're just talking about traditional VMs, traditional EC2 on the AWS side,
Yeah.
we're working at supporting those workloads. And as we're working with clients in those ecosystems, what we found is there's a lot of clients that, let's say, particularly during the COVID period, had made a lot of knee-jerk reactions of, the world has changed. We've got to move to the cloud. And they moved a lot of workloads into the cloud that are maybe suboptimal for a true hyperscaler operating model. So we've actually developed a significant practice around the repatriation of those workloads, taking clients that are maybe spending $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 on services that are suboptimal, say in AWS, for example, specific customer case where they were using snapshotting for their backup methodology, which was resulting in this massive cost increases, be able to repatriate that workload back into a traditional VMware-based cloud environment and use a more appropriate backup methodology for their data retention needs. They were able to save $45,000 a month simply on pivoting their model of data retention to leveraging a core tool set rather than just a kind of repetitive hyperscale process that wasn't optimized for that type of workload case.
Yeah, right tool at the right time. You brought up COVID, and also looking at the site, you guys do a little bit of, you do some remote. I don't think I'll say a little bit. You do some remote end user computing. I'm a huge fan. People on the show, I talk about DaaS all the time. Anywhere I can squeeze it in. I know you guys aren't a DaaS provider, but you're sort of an infrastructure provider for VDI effectively. I think if I have that right, tell us a little bit about that business and do it in the vein of COVID. Like, has it changed? Is there more take up for it? I've always felt like virtual desktop is like the best idea that's been searching for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it feels like a hard sell because people think it's tough, but it's really not.
Yeah, it's been interesting just kind of to step back and just say, watching the development of the market over time, and there's kind of these ebbs and flows, and there's certainly many different use cases for VDI or desktop or multi-tenant type solutions, and I think the key thing is just kind of understanding for an organization what the best fit is, because there's certainly great solutions, kind of across the spectrum when you're looking at things like workspaces or AVD. Yeah. And then you say, okay, those are great for kind of some of the, I'll say, higher density, maybe lower performance type workloads. Typically where we focus is on the higher end of the spectrum. So when we're looking at needs of clients that are doing things like, developers. And when I say developers, these aren't guys that are just, have one terminal up and banging out a few lines of code, but where they're developing large applications, large data sets, they need that localized dev test and performance, or things like CAD CAM, where you've got GPU resources that are requirements, even video editing or other use cases where those dedicated resources are core, but also having something where it is a controlled ecosystem where basically security is paramount and also cost control. One of the things about desktop as a service, whether you're operating it on a hyperscale or even a localized platform, that if it's not architected appropriately, the opportunity for cost overrun in terms of, hey, my sales team spun up all of their desktop instances and left them running all month, 24 hours a day, and now I've got this monstrous bill as an organization. There's kind of some things that come along with that in correctly architected solutions from the start, it's a very predictable cost model. So when we look at an organization and say, how can you develop a process and a plan for understanding what is my expense as an organization to onboard a new team member, and say, okay, if I'm using a desktop and VDI solution, it's a fixed piece of infrastructure with a very prescribed security model, a great security posture and position where you can replicate that time and time again. The concerns about things like, BYOD are significantly reduced because you're providing a tightly controlled ecosystem. But with that tightly controlled ecosystem, you're also providing a very fixed cost structure. So it's an opportunity to easily map out everything about what the experience is for team members and resources within the organization, but also map out exactly what that means to the business in terms of what is your cost to onboard, offboard, manage. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I love what you said about DaaS being, good for like sort of, light, I almost destructible workloads. And what I mean by that is like, I don't need persistence. I can just come in, I can chop up, treat it like a kiosk, do my work, shut it down.
Yeah, it's a data entry use case, right? Come along, spin it up, enter some data, close it down.
Exactly. But what's interesting for you is you're talking about it sort of from a cloud infrastructure perspective, almost like the use case you're trying to get after is the people who are replacing desktops every year and a half, right? CAD engineers, devs, like that's interesting. It's definitely a different approach as opposed to like trying to make the desktop simpler. You're basically saying like, listen, you can't afford to keep throwing, heavy meat at these applications on desktops every day. I like that. That's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the CAD opportunity. It was one that used to come up to me all the time. There were always people who were like exploring VDI just because they were like, I can't afford machines all the time for this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's extraordinarily expensive, and that's kind of one, again, the benefit of the cloud for all of these use cases, whether it's VDI or traditional primary compute, is that as fast as things are changing, IT infrastructures and organizations, when you again talk back to that point of what is that mid-market, right? That IT budget of those dollars of CapEx that are going out the door for these continuous refreshes, those are dollars that could be spent in turn on expanding the skill set of the team, adding more members to the team, being able to spend more time within the business, affecting change of making IT kind of an engine that drives the business instead of just a cost center for another box that's going on the floor.
Totally get it. Before we jump into some fun closing remarks here, I'll just ask it this way, wrap it up. We talked about a lot of stuff, like the Performive like superpower here. We sort of got into it earlier and then we got geeky quickly. Like, where should people be thinking about you guys?
So specifically, we kind of touched on a lot of those things from a technology, brand names, product ecosystems, but really at the core of it is that our belief here is that we're really a customer service organization with a technology product. And what that means and what that turns into is the way that we engage with our clients and our process is that even early on, the very first piece of our sales process is not telling you all about who we are and what we do, but hearing what are your challenges and needs? Where are you in a business? Back to our point of being able to meet you where you are, is we need to develop that understanding of where you are, what your goals and objectives are, and most importantly, what are those pain points? Yeah, because that's what our superpower is we've been here. We have the longevity. We've seen the iterations and changes in technology. We've seen hundreds and thousands of other businesses like, our customers' business, like your business, that we can say, we've seen these challenges and problems. We're going to help you attack those and overcome those. So Mr. IT director who has 6 projects on the board and is only going to get one of those done this year, we're going to take a look at that and say, how do we get you to 2, 3, 4, 5, and that magical 6? How do you get all those knocked down? That's really our superpower. There's a lot of technology behind it. There's a lot of great product ecosystems, but really understanding how to apply the right tool for the right job. That's our superpower.
Got it. I love that. It's you certainly mentioned VMware, you certainly mentioned mid-market, you mentioned cloud. At the end of the day, though, if all those things apply and you need somebody who's willing to get their hands dirty, if I'm oversimplifying what you just said, right, to help you make the most effective use of it, that's what separates you guys. How'd I do? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment. And then I'll say, it is a broader technology stack and ecosystem.
Of course, yeah.
We've got a lot of great solutions, but we recognize that there's some significant, back to the point of, understanding pain points. There's definitely significant pain for customers right now to help, navigate those waters. They're challenging.
Fantastic. Well, this has been great, Ryan. I like to end with some fun. So before we go, I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is an easy one, maybe, depending on how you look at it.
Maybe. Let's see.
We'll look back at this in 12 months or 18 months. And we always do a recap episode every year. So maybe this one will even sneak in the short term. I need a shameless prediction out of you. It doesn't matter in what category. It can be business, sports, macroeconomic, whatever you want it to be for the next 12 to 18 months. Just be Nostradamus for a minute.
Oh gosh. Let's see. I'm smiling all over the place. We'll touch sports.
Okay.
We'll touch that one briefly.
Shoot.
Let's say, so I mentioned I came to the Atlanta market 93, 94. I grew up in South Florida. So from a sports fan, I'm a transplant. Almost everyone in Atlanta is from somewhere else these days.
Sure,
it's very rare you meet a native anymore, but I'm a Marlins, Dolphins, and then Gators fan. So baseball, Braves just got in the playoffs. You're a Philly fan. I'll say Braves are out in 3. Or is it 4? Is it 4? No, they'll be out in 3. They're out to the Padres. So you don't have any fear of the Braves right now. So no Braves this year. Too many injuries. They're gone. And I'm a Marlins fan anyway, so I don't really care.
All right. You want to take it a step further? Who's going to win the World Series then? Throw it out there. Man,
I honestly don't know this year. I think it's really a toss up. I'm going to go for a crazy one because I am a Dolphins fan and my wife's a Chiefs fan. So they're going to have to get by them. But I think next year, Tua healthy, team healthy, people playing, I think the Dolphins have a solid shot next year. I thought it was this year, but I'm going to be shameless and defer and I'll take next.
I mean, as a football fan, I hope to see Tua. You know what I mean? There's been so much talk about the concussions with him. He's a talent fan. He's fun to watch. On the field.
As a person, I would like to see him just take health first and foremost, and
of course
consider that retirement. But as a Dolphins fan, hey, they're our modern day gladiators. I like to see them there out on the field fighting for that win. It's a tough game.
Gotcha. It definitely is. All right. Here's a fun one. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made as a technology leader?
Biggest mistake. Gosh, as a leader.
It doesn't need to be like a leadership one, like I should have managed this person better. It could be like, oh my God, I hit the button and foobarred the whole network. Give us something fun.
No, thankfully I haven't.
That wasn't fun in the moment, clearly, but it's fun to look back now.
Man, there's moments, I wouldn't say they were mistakes, but man, there are moments I would love to have back. Yeah. I'd say
give us one.
Earlier on, I mentioned we built a data center, and this was 2009. Great learning experience, but man, the moment where you can kind of feel your heart sink and just everything drops. We were in the middle of expanding that facility, adding on a second power system. So it was a full 2-in site, all those sorts of things, great improvements. But in the middle of that, suffered a critical power failure and actually had a generator physically explode, actually rapidly disassemble itself, throw parts out of the engine block and just collapse.
Where'd this screw come from? Oh no. Yeah.
That screw, a big V16 shoving internal pieces out of a hole in the side of the engine. This was not fun. But anyway, the point being kind of a mistake or a challenge. At that point in time, that was a learning experience when you're looking at kind of infrastructure at scale and large scale things. you can never underestimate the amount of redundancy you need to build into any process.
Yeah.
That particular event was something that was, it's like one of those black swan, once in a lifetime type things. You're building in all of the efficiency and the redundancy, but as you're deploying the redundancy, you're exposed and that one bang breaks, right? That's from that point forward. I've always wanted to be a pilot, but I can't get to being the type of pilot that I want because I only want to fly a plane that's got 2 engines. You don't get there without flying one that's only got 1, right?
I love that.
That mistake early on.
They don't want to fall out of the sky, right? I mean, they say like if the engine goes, you can still land it, but I don't trust that. I just clearly
I like redundancy. That was kind of an early learning lesson from there on out. The more redundancy, the better. All
right, I'm going to ask you a single-threaded question though, and here's a fun one.
Okay.
The world's generator goes out, and so the next like crazy event happens, and I'm not sure, you can pick whatever dystopian future you want, but only one application on your phone continues to work. Which one is it? You get
flashlight.
Atta guy. I like that one. He answered brilliantly. Flashlight, he said. No, that's good. I've been asking that question through like 60 some odd episodes, and only one person besides you has ever said flashlight, which is
you said power. You said dystopian. Power's gone, right?
Let's go. Yeah.
I can only charge it for so long. Hopefully solar exists. But,
Well, that's amazing. This was a great time and a great conversation. I really appreciate your time today, Ryan. Thanks so much for being here on the Bridgecast.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much. We'll hopefully see you soon on another episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.